Okay, I've got a couple of dreams to cover off here. This probably won't be a very long video. It's mainly going to be me literally just reading it off here, so I might sound a little bit robotic, I guess, but there's not really much need for me to sort of deviate off of these thoughts and this explanation as we go. Okay, so this one happened on the 8th of January 2026. First dream, so I'll start with this one. So I was waiting at a bus stop with my father-in-law, and of course, and there were some others. Obviously, it was a bus stop, but I didn't know any of these people. The only people I knew was my father-in-law who was with me there. I was at one of my childhood home bus stops that I used to use. So this is all before I used to drive. And anyway, the bus arrived. We all got on. My father-in-law got on first, and I was basically the last one to get on the bus. And yeah, as we were getting on the bus, we were showing kind of like a bus pass to the driver, rather than using any kind of cash. So it wasn't cash; it was presenting some sort of, it was like a card sort of receipt sort of thing that we handed over to the driver. But as my father-in-law passed it over to the driver, it was really crumpled up. So it's like something had been in his pocket for quite a while. Yeah, really crumpled up. And as he just handed this ticket over, he went and sat down, and then the driver just sort of like uncrumpled it, opened it up, and saw that. Yeah, there we go. And saw that in opening that, uncrumpling that ticket, while my father-in-law went and sat down, he noticed that there was some cash sort of rolled up. Well, not rolled up, but just like a note, let's say, that was kind of crumpled up in amongst this bus ticket. And the driver was pleasantly surprised. So, and rather than give that money back to my father-in-law, he, given he had a valid ticket, so the ticket was fine. He basically paid his money or whatever. Well, not his money, but he'd had a valid ticket. The driver sort of smiled at me, and I wasn't quite sure on this. So he sort of smiled at me in this way that I wasn't quite sure whether he was smiling at me in a kind of like a mean way, like he is. Because what he did is he took the note and put it in some sort of a tip. It looked like a tip bin. It was like a little bin thing that he threw this money into, and it was literally like a small trash can sort of little bin thing that he threw it in. It looked like a small denomination note, not that I could actually tell because it was completely colourless. So it was kind of like a grey, white, greys and whites, that kind of thing, the colours of these notes, which is which is completely different to our notes in the UK. Our notes are different sizes and different colours, so you can easily see what note you've got, that kind of thing. But he just kind of threw it from where his driver's seat was, and it went into this bin. Yeah. So I handed my ticket over, and I went and sat down next to my father-in-law. But I didn't mention anything about this money that was kind of within his ticket. And then the bus pulled away. So while driving, the driver called out complaining of a smell of wee. So it smelled. Yeah, he basically said it really smelled horrible. Smell of wee on the bus. And I knew it wasn't my father-in-law from sitting next to him, that it wasn't him. But there was quite a few, I would say quite older people that say on both sides of the bus that I could see in front of me. So I would say roughly 3-4 rows maybe from the front, which put me approximately, let's say, halfway down the bus, roughly. And I was on the left-hand side of the bus, on the aisle seat, with my father-in-law, who was just kind of just staring out the window, basically, and I'm sitting next to him, just looking down the bus, I suppose, on that aisle seat. I started to. Oh yeah, the other thing I mentioned here is, very oddly, I noticed that it was exactly the same spot that when I met Jesus in one of my dreams, which is one of my first ones I filmed in season 1. I was in exactly the same position on exactly the same side of the bus as well. So it's very strange that I was in exactly the same spot. Really bizarre. It's almost like I had the same seat. Really strange. Anyway, but I only noticed that when I wrote it out. I thought, hang on a minute, that's the same spot I was at. in that dream. So I'll actually put that one in then. So I'll put that video in, which is about which had Jesus in it, and that's the only time that I ever claim that was actually Jesus. That's the only time I've claimed that. He's been in various different ones, or people that have played him as a character, but this I feel was Jesus in this dream. But again, you'll get that from my dream. Right. So yeah. So the passengers. So as I said, this driver's obviously mentioned about this smell of wee, and everyone's just kind of looking at each other. You know, who is it? Who is it? That sort of thing. All looking at each other casually to determine, who was the source of this smell. I've no idea of the point. I really didn't know what the outcome would be. If somebody identified this person, yeah, he's the one who smells of wee. What were they going to do? Were they going to chuck him out the bus or her out the bus? There wasn't any kind of clear understanding what would happen there. The driver just made this comment, and that was kind of it. It's just like he was complaining. Anyway, on the left hand side of the bus, so my side, there was a husband and a wife, which were about 2 rows in front of me, so they're very, very close to the front. And so that would make sense that he maybe smelt somebody who was closest to him as well. But husband and wife, as I said, two rows in front of me, and the wife gave her husband sort of like a little bit of a nudge, and was indicating it was probably him that smelt. And I would have said, I put he/they, I would have said was probably in very late 70s into their 80s, I imagine. And he stood up looking very confused and, he's just sort of looking around, not really knowing what's going on. Listening to what his wife was saying, but it could have been the case he had Alzheimer's or, dementia, something like that, because he just didn't seem to know what was going on. He was very, very confused and looking to his wife for direction. I didn't see really what happened, if anything, to him. As on the right, because it got kind of interrupted by somebody on the right-hand side of the bus, right towards the front, had actually seen my father-in-law, and he started as the bus was still going along. He left his seat and then walked over to us. Yeah, stood up, walked over to us, and his eyes were fixed on my father-in-law, who was still staring out the window. It was just like this guy recognised him, and he started to actually talk to my father-in-law from the aisle next to us, saying how that they served together in the war, and wanted a friendly chat with him, but he was just completely blanking this guy, didn't acknowledge him at all, and then the dream just abruptly ended. So that's all there really was to that. Don't really understand what that bit was about, to be honest. Certain elements of dreams I can't always quite get the understanding, but that's the first dream. Dream 2 then, completely separate, completely different, but obviously we do little recappy bits on that one. So dream 2. So this was actually the previous dream to this bus one. So I recall talking with someone about wanting a new house. Maybe it was like an estate agent. Estate agent as in like a realtor, obviously in America, but it was that sort of environment I was in. It actually reminded me a little bit like a new build sort of site where you'd go and they would provide you with details of all the homes that they're building, and you're kind of choosing the one that you want. Similar sort of thing to that, but they were older buildings as well. So that's why I think it was more an estate agent sort of, as I said, a realtor, that kind of setup. And I mentioned to them that preferably I wanted a new build. I remember picking up a model house. So it was almost like it was made of plastic or something. It was a model of this particular house, of a specific design, and it was a sort of religious building of sorts that I picked up. It was, I wrote down, it was sort of like a priory. I may be wrong on the wording there, but it reminded me of a priory model that my mum had actually. So she used to collect these little model houses that we used to put in like a display cabinet thing. And it used to be something I used to buy for her on her birthdays and Christmases. I used to save up for it, when I was relatively youngish, and used to buy them for her, whichever one she liked, or I liked the look of. I remember one of them I bought specifically because there was a girl in my class when I was in like junior school. What age would I have been? Like 7, 8, something like that. There was a girl I really, really liked, and the name of this house actually happened to be very, very similar to her. her surname, and I bought it just for that reason. Don't know why, but I remember that specifically. One of them was for that reason. But what I was doing, as I said, I was picking up this model in this estate agent, and just taking a little bit of a look at it. But it was as I said, it was a clay model. This thing, what it was made out of. So no plastic. I jumped the gun a bit there, didn't I? It says here, yeah, it was a clay model in the same way, or it was very, very similar to what I would have bought for my mum. As I said, that particular set of houses, which are all made out of clay, put together that way. So as mentioned, it was a Christian building, but it was quite small, only a little bigger than a standard house. So as I said, this is a priory, which again, I remember the one that my mum had. She actually had one of these, and so that's why I remember the priory, coming to mind. And this was, as I said, a Christian building. Yeah, only a little bit bigger than a standard house, and I remember seeing a cross on the building somewhere. So this is what identified it to me as being a Christian building of some sort, but it certainly wasn't a church. But it could have been maybe one that had been purchased by the church for a pastor to live in, or something like that, maybe. A little bit like you buy, or it could have been like a standard building that had been used for that function and now was on the open market for anybody to buy. So I put here a little bit like a lighthouse, that gets decommissioned, it's not needed anymore. And then an average person can just purchase that if they want to, or old post offices. I remember going to one of those once when I had to, for my job, because I do mortgage finance. And I remember having to go to this guy's house, and it was still on Google and stuff like that as an actual post office, but it had been that had been shut down completely, and it had been turned into a residential house. And it was an absolute nightmare finding it. It was one of these ones where it was on a country road in the middle of nowhere. Navigation couldn't find it. I mean, if navigation can't find it, what hope have I got of finding it? So I was going around in circles for absolutely ages, pitch black, late at night. I just wanted to go home. Yeah, nightmare, absolute nightmare. I remember it took me ages to find it. But that's what it kind of reminded me of. As I said, some sort of a conversion maybe that was now available. It had been available to the public to purchase. But yeah, it reminded me of I put there church bought by a pastor. Yes, I said that earlier, didn't I? Anyway, what I realised was what I was looking for here was a slightly bigger home. Was basically what I was looking for in this scenario, really, and that it would work only if my wife was financially able to contribute towards this. So she's not working. She's been medically retired realistically now for 10 years, more than 10 years, probably more than 10 years now. Let's say about 12, 13 years, something like that. She's been medically retired because of all sorts of back issues and full body problems that just don't allow her really to do anything. And so the way we were looking at it was, it'd be such a stretch to get something bigger that it would only really work if she was working and could contribute financially, which would mean her going back to work. And I was thinking, how realistic is that? Maybe she would want to do that. She'd do it in the short term, but then I thought that it would put unfair pressure on her, and it would also put a lot of pressure on me if we had to do the finances just on me, all on me. A lot of pressure with me working long hours to hit large targets to actually get the income to sustain this kind of property. Because I was actually doing my current job in this dream. Anyway, the conversation developed into us actually discussing houses in heaven. Bit of a random conversation to have with an estate agent, but apparently we were. This was between the few of us that were in this building, where we were just sort of having a chat about property and stuff like that. I remember my mum being one of them, but I can't remember the others that were there with me. But it could just be members of the public, just general people. And we were discussing our dream homes. So that's what we were actually having a chat about. And I started, I think, the conversation. I initially said how I would like a new build, because obviously that's what I'm talking to these guys about, a new build. Yeah, I picked up something that wasn't a new build, which doesn't make a great deal of sense. But from within the dream, I recalled the fact that I had dreams in reality, which I have had in reality. Many of the dreams actually have involved me buying a semi-detached house. So where you've got one neighbour next to you, and that's it. So it's like one big house that's split in two, and then, which is what we live in now. It's what I lived in as a kid. And so it's really all I've been used to, apart from that we purchased a flat and we rented a detached property, a little bungalow. which is just a little, little one story rather than a two story. But so what I go on here to describe is things that happen in reality. So I am actually talking about reality, really. So many of the dreams I've had, actually, I've had ones where I've in a dream I've bought I bought a property, let's say, or an estate agent's showing me around, like they give me the keys or something like that, and I've ended up buying both sides. So I ended up buying one property, one part of the property, one property, let's say, and obviously my neighbour's my neighbour. That's it. But what happens is sometimes in picking up all the keys or something like that, it might be the case they go, "Oh no, you've got both properties." And I'm like, "What? How'd that happen?" And I end up, walking across the other side of the home and looking around. And there's been all sorts of dreams I've had. I remember one I had where I went into the loft and I was having a little look around in the loft, and it was haunted or something. And ones where I had loads of rubbish and stuff like that all in this room. I mean, a lot of this, yeah. I mean, I won't go into the meaning just yet, but I've had loads of those dreams, tons of them. Yeah. So that's basically what I'm talking about. So having access, and actually, in reality, that did happen. So one of our friends we used to hang around with when we were sort of like more, let's say, mid to late teens, I would have said, had a house, and they'd actually purchased their next door neighbour's house. So they just had basically two houses that were side by side, but they bought both of them. So it's weird because you get a postman that would post letters on one side of the house and post letters on the other side of the house, even though they owned both of them. And they knocked down the wall in between, and it was like a shared kitchen and everything. And it was like, it's just really strange because I'd never come across anybody that done that before. And yeah, so that's what it kind of reminded me of, was my again, this is what I wanted. I basically just wanted what I had right now, just slightly bigger. So there's a bit more room. So where were we? Yeah, so I talked about the houses. So I have gone off script. Look, haven't I? Look, a couple of dreams. Yep. And where are we? There we go. However, coming back to the dream, right? That's where I wanted to find it. I ended up switching my mind from a new build to something that was a bit more like a big stately home. So what I mean is just like basically a mansion. The sort of thing that you see with like big pillars, pillars of marble and stacks of rooms, and far older, like 1700s, that's 1800s, that kind of thing. Loads of land, all that kind of stuff is what I sort of said. Again, I don't know. I think this is when I was, again, because I'm still talking about, I suppose, my dream home would be this just absolutely gigantic one. And again, I've had a dream about that specifically. Happened to actually talk about it to my daughter yesterday, which was weird because I asked her the same question. I don't know why that even came up when I was in the car. Yeah, I just said to her, if you could have any home, any house, just think up the craziest thing you want. What would you want? And she said, I'd want a really big long drive and a really big gate on the front. I was like, that is so weird because I had a dream with you in. And specifically, you were showing me around a big, long, windy drive and a huge, big gate. And that's the only area that you're exploring in my dream. I said, that's really strange. That is actually the one that's, it's a nuclear attack one, actually. It turns into a nuclear attack on the UK. It's really intense, actually. I don't know what that was called. Is that nuclear blast? It might be nuclear blast. I'm not sure. It might be. But that was actually a bit I cut out because when I did film it, it was kind of like a bit I went around and I was saying how we were discussing all the types of ground sort of tiles and stuff and how we were going to design this driveway. And it was with my youngest daughter that I was doing that. But it felt like a somewhat pointless part of the dream, really. And it kind of really extended the dream out. So I thought, I'll just leave it. I won't include it. I don't think it's really adding too much. That said, maybe I did include it. I can't actually remember because again, I did record it twice, and so maybe I did cover it off. I'm not sure. Yeah, it may well be in there, but I'll cite the video in there anyway. It's again that's a pretty incredible dream, to be honest. It was so full on nuclear blast where I could feel it. I could feel the heat, which you don't normally have feelings, do you? In dreams, you don't feel the cold necessarily. You don't feel You don't sense smells and things like that. This dream was a bit different. Um, Again, it was really intense. So that's the most intense, or is it? Sort of evangelistic kind of one as well. But yeah, I'll put that in the notes. But yeah, weirdly, she was talking about that. We were talking about it yesterday. So that's what she wanted: big gate, big drive. And I had that in that dream, that specific dream. Anyway, where did we get to? Big stately home. Yeah. So after discussing these dreams that I've had in the past, so which I've already just talked you through, um, a less than humble dream is what. Sorry, a less than humble home is what I've come up with as. No, I don't actually want the house that's very similar to mine, just a little bit bigger. No, I want a mansion. I want something that's absolutely gigantic. That you know, almost like the sort of level that royalty have. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of punched a bit high there with that. So essentially, a mansion is what I wanted. This massive, massive mansion. We've got one local to us actually, that I mentioned that we got married in actually, um, which I'll just mention on there, which had me going along this drive on that's the royal wedding one. Yeah, royal wedding, and I'm on a horse and stuff like that. Yeah, it's quite a funny one. Okay, so from within the dream, as I was discussing these new homes, I felt this kind of acknowledgement from God, like a yes. It was almost like, oh, okay. It was almost like an acknowledgement of that's what you've got, sort of thing. If you see what I mean, I think it was there. Although I do mention further on, it might have been another time actually when I got that, but it may have been from within in the dream. I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, when I was discussing the discovery aspect of those dreams. Oh yeah, when I was talking about, sorry, that's when I got the confirmation. When I was talking about homes that I have this discovery where I get this bonus bedroom, or there's some sort of secret wall that opens and it takes you into some different room, that kind of thing. That's the sort of thing that I have in my dreams quite a lot. Discovery, stuff to keep me busy. It's often the kind of house that needs doing up, which interestingly does not parallel my life really, because I really wish that we just bought a home that just didn't need much doing, because ever since we've moved here, there's just such a massive list of things that need doing. But it was the type of house we wanted, and it was actually a massive stretch to get the home, and other completely much lower down the list sort of homes were the ones that were really within our price range. But this was a bit of a fixer upper, so I thought, well, look, we'll go in and it will be a bit of a mess when we go in, but over time we'll get it to where we want it. Again, we're 10 years in now, and we've only had a carpet for about 3 years, so it was like really threadbare, like 1970s carpet. We'd had plastering done and stuff like that, so all the plasterers had to hack like the side of the carpet off, so we had to stick it down with sticky tape and stuff. So that's what we had for like 6 or 7 years, so. And then as soon as you get the carpet, then it gets wrecked, doesn't it? You're like, oh, been waiting absolutely ages for this, and now the carpet's wrecked because someone's dropped something on it. Like, oh, brilliant. Anyway. But as I said, the confirmation I got was, as I was talking about this discovery aspect, they often involve homes that have real potential, ones that need a lot of work, but they've got a good structure. Again, a frequent type I have in my dream. I sort of thought like it was like a confirmation that I was going to get a house in heaven that was going to be one that was going to keep me busy, that was going to have excitement, it was going to have discovery, renovation, aspects like that, making the house a home, a project, that kind of thing. That said, that confirmation I felt like I received may have been from earlier in the day when I watched a video. So yeah, I was a little bit confused as to true reality in this dream, because I had watched one, you see. So this is part of transparency, really. I had actually watched something with another YouTuber who loves going through what it's going to be like in the future, when we go to heaven, and there's going to be this, whatever you want to do, you can do it. You're going to have lots of free time. Obviously, there's going to be worship and things like that, but there's going to be loads of free time that you can do stuff in. And he was talking about his home and things like that. He was talking about homes in heaven, and I was kind of thinking, actually, when I was watching his video, and he was talking about, well, I'd want this and I'd want to do that, and I want to go on hunting trips, and I want to, I'm trying to think what he said, like, I want to chop wood, and I want to, for a fire and stuff, and I want to do all this stuff. I want to go out, I want to go out camping. And he's talking about all these kind of things. And I really do. I was thinking back, you see, as to what I'd really want. I mean, when I was back at school, when I was doing I did technical drawing, architectural sort of stuff, because I wanted to be an architect actually. But I just didn't have the education level really to pull that off. It meant university, and it was what was it? Mathematics, A level, geography, physics, and they're all things that I really wasn't very strong in. I was pretty strong in designing things and creativity, but not really in those other aspects. It was too practical, I suppose, and I just sort of dropped that as a dream. Really, I thought, well, that's never going to happen, is it? And I did start. I started doing physics, and I did geography, but maths was just so out of grasp. I thought, well, maybe if I get some of them, there'll be something maybe lower down the list that I can maybe do. But it didn't last. Really, to be honest, further education for me was just a complete flop. I just dropped out of everything more or less, and I was just sitting around playing cards for ages, and then I just have one subject a day. It's a bit of a waste of time, really. Still, yeah, as I said, I can't be 100% sure whether that was the case, as to whether I got this real kind of heart flutter, let's say, this kind of conviction, like the Holy Spirit was maybe sort of giving me a little nudge as to, yeah, that's the sort of thing you'll have. I couldn't really tell whether that was in that video or whether it was in the dream itself, so I'm not sure. But anyway, there we go. As we were discussing together in this dream, our preferred houses in heaven, we were in this kind of standard house, and actually reminded me of aspects of our first home, apparently a 2-bedroom flat. Yeah. So as we walked into this house, which is pretty empty, I was talking about my dreams regarding renovating houses. And as we're talking about transporting houses, then I got transported to this mansion. So obviously I've been previously talking about a mansion, and then suddenly I got transported to a mansion. It was really, really strange that I was previously describing. And so I just got transported to, similar to the mansion, where I said I wanted a stately home, some sort of massive, somebody who was phenomenally rich, back when this home was built, say in the 1800s. I was transported to this mansion anyway. So I remember walking along this pretty long hallway, and it had just door after door after door on both sides of what I can only presume would be bedrooms and all sorts of things that were kind of coming off of this thing. And yeah, as I walked to the end of this pretty long hallway, actually, it then, when it got to the end, it just swept out into this long sweeping, those big sweeping sort of staircases that you see come down, twirl around and come to the ground floor. It was like that. So I said it was very much like, the kind of sweeping staircases that you get in the Titanic film, where you see it right at the end. You see those sweeping staircases. Well, you see it before then, don't you? But that's what I've got in my mind. Or Beauty and the Beast, or something like that. It's those kind of gigantic places that this was very similar to. Yeah, massive staircase. And actually, what's really bizarre about this staircase is I'm slowly sort of going down this staircase, but I'm looking at the spindles, in between the rail. And there were all these white spindles, but on the top they had this really odd gargoyle-looking face that was also white, but it had blue eye sockets on it. Very odd. And I thought the design was absolutely awful. I was like, who came up with this? I mean, it looks disgusting. And yeah. And I said, yeah, I thought the design was absolutely awful. And again, like other dreams, actually, I felt that there was that it was going to be the first thing I was going to change. It was like, those spindles have got to go. I mean, I'm not having all these weird demonic looking gargoyle faces on these spindles. And then I started to get a real haunted sort of vibe, like there was stuff in the house. And then but I just, in the dream, I just utterly rejected it. And I actually said how fear has no hold over me. That was literally like a phrase I said. Fear has no hold over me. And I was, and then I was just about to go and start blessing the house and actually expelling any kind of demonic spirits. But then I woke up before that work started. Okay. So quite a full dream, really, that one, the amount of detail on it. So transparency, well, I've already kind of mentioned, haven't I, the fact that I watched this video by somebody that was talking about expressing their excitement over new homes and activities, socializing in the future. And so, of course, this could have clearly affected my dreams. And while thinking on where I would want my house, I felt the woods. Yeah. So I mentioned here we used to go to a tourist spot. There's loads of them all over the UK, and it's the kind of place where you have like a central, that you say they have a central district which would have all like your restaurants, and it'd have a lot of like gym facilities, swimming pools, all that kind of stuff. And then off of that, you'd have a like sets of rings of loads of different types of houses. So like smaller houses, bigger, like log cabins, that kind of thing, tree houses, and all sorts of stuff that you could go into. And for years and years and years, before we even had kids, we sort of went there for a bit. But then when we had kids, we wanted them to be, to have that kind of memory of those kind of holidays. So it was all UK based, and I love that. I love things where it's very much self-contained. That you go somewhere. Ideally, you don't need a car now. You're parked up. You're at the resort. Your food. Well, you come back to the hotel. You get your food, or you've got shops very very close by. You get your food. Everything you need is there. With that particular type of resort, that I'm talking about, as I said, it has swimming pools, it has gyms, it has tennis courts, badminton courts. It's got loads of restaurants to eat. You've got takeaways, so you can take it to your home. You've got standard shops, so you can just buy your food. Gift shops, activity sort of places. In that, you've got like arcade machines, pool tables, bars, and then you've got outdoor activities like golf courses, archery, paintball, quad biking, stacks of stuff. Absolutely stacks of stuff to keep you busy. And that's just the sort of place I'd love to live. It's like if you could buy houses in a place like that, that'd be it for me. That's absolutely perfect. Everything in one spot, short walk, everything's there, all you could possibly want. Um, and for very healthy living, because if you're surrounded by this kind of environment that promotes healthy living, sporting activity, brilliant. It's just the sort of thing that I would love. Yeah, so I always love the idea of living in a forest, because again, when I was doing my kind of graphic design and designing things and starting to understand a bit about architecture and things like that, I really love the idea of having like full glass wall, in a wood where you've just got all the beautiful, all the trees and the shadows and the wildlife and stuff like that. Thought it might be a little bit creepy at night time, but I suppose you've got, blinds and stuff you could shut, things like that during night time. But during the day, I think it just looked beautiful. So that, and a lake, all these kind of things, all these kind of things is just what I think would be absolutely perfect. And that is always something I think of, actually, is I know whatever it is that God puts us together in heaven is going to be better than we could have ever thought of. He would know exactly what the perfect thing is going to be. So you just know that it's going to be fantastic. But it's funny why you think of it on earth and then you think, but he might do something completely different to that, which is actually way, way better than I could have imagined. And you just think, oh, I thought I would have liked that, but now I've seen it. Yeah, tropical island, that's way better, that sort of thing. Yeah, that's what it made me think of. But anyway, where are we? But yeah. I talk about my circumstances and how actually getting somewhere bigger, which I have been thinking about for quite some time, would be great, but unrealistic. Again, like I mentioned this was a reality check. Unrealistic. Okay. So my initial thoughts about the dream were that it was probably all just about a product of my current thoughts, let's say. No idea why. With the bus stop one, when my father-in-law was necessarily in it, but why he was approached and said that he'd been in a war. Definitely not been in a war, not old enough to have been in a war. So that was a bit strange. And I put, maybe I made that connection in the dream because of the age of the occupants of that bus. Maybe that's where I was thinking war for some reason. But it seemed so incredibly random. And I assumed that what was meant by that was World War II. Anyway, so that's it as far as those thoughts were on that. But I then had a bit of a confirmation. So I wrote this dream out. I put here 7 a.m. on the 8th of the 1st, 2025. 2026. Yeah, 2026. I wrote the dream out on the 8th of the 1st, 2026. And as I said, I'm a mortgage broker. And it just so happened that the first client I spoke to of the day, hours after writing it in the book, it was like I think it was an early-ish appointment, wanted to buy, they basically had a home already and they wanted to raise funds on their home to purchase another home. And I found out that the home they wanted to purchase was the other part of their semi-detached house. And I was kind of like, no way. That's literally what I've just been thinking of and talking about in my dream. And then it happens the same day, that morning. So that I saw as a confirmation, not because of it obviously was describing the same thing, but it's also incredibly rare. Incredibly rare. And I was really struggling. I was thinking back. I was thinking like my entire mortgage career, I've done well over 2,000 mortgages. Well over 2,000 mortgages. I tend to do about 200 a year. I've been doing it for about 11, 12 years, roughly. So well over 2,000 mortgages. And I was really racking my brains to think, has this ever come up before? I remember somebody did inquire once before, maybe, but that's it. I mean, I was literally thinking, like, this has probably happened once or twice in my entire working life as a mortgage broker in the last 2,000 mortgages. What are the chances that would come up a couple of hours, 3 hours after I wake up and write this in my dream journal? Like, how realistic is that? I just don't think it is. I think that's a confirmation, because I do get those kind of confirmations where it's literally moments later something will come up that's exactly the same. And you would have seen these if you watch many of the videos. You would have seen these now, like where I've actually shown you the video of what happened, or I've directed you to where the video is so you can actually see it. For some of them, and obviously they're not all being videos. So further thought. So back to dream one, which was that bus one. I would certainly say that the prepaid bus pass made me think of grace. Okay. So that Jesus has already paid for us to get to heaven, which was the bus. It felt like it represented that form of travel that I have mentioned before, is that the bus represents travel going to heaven, and that we quite often, a bus I find represents the rapture, because it's mass travel of people from one place to another. And I actually had that in the Jesus dream that I just mentioned at the beginning. It was in that as well. We were on a coach trip. We were in the same place. And so that kind of made that little connection with me as well, where I've had it before and I know what the meaning was previously. Well, I know what the meaning is again then, don't I? Potentially. But I felt that it was to do with the fact that our bus ticket, so our travel to heaven, has been paid for. We were just handing over tickets, prepaid. Okay, that's what I felt like it was sort of talking about. And the cash element, so that was thrown in the bin, made me think of the fact that you cannot buy your way into heaven. Like, of course, people thinking, well, I put here, people in the past, people presently, and in the future will think that they can buy their way into heaven. Many of the religions of the world feel that it's like a weighing scale, how many good things did you do against bad things? And that's how you get in. But you've got no way of measuring it. I mean, but how do you know which things are seen as bad things, and how much they're weighted versus the good things? It's a scale that doesn't, you can't match up. You can't know whether you're ever going to heaven or not. It's very strange, I find. But yeah, that's what it was making me think of. So, the cash element, I think was thrown in for that kind of reason, that you cannot buy your way into heaven. Just that is just not true. It seems to be a lot of people think that, I'll get into heaven. Well, what's going to allow you to get into heaven? Well, I give to charity. I do some weekend work where I help out a charity. I donate money to, when all these people are asking for money, I've given money to the homeless. I'll get in. But where are you getting that from? Where is the list you're checking that against to know whether that's true or not? Like, it's a very strange thought thing, I find, is I'll get into heaven, right? Well, that's a biblical concept, really. So the Bible tells us. So where are you getting it from? It's just a bit of a strange conversation, isn't it, what you can have with people, as to where are you getting that from? It just doesn't make any sense. Yeah, and I purchased away. Interesting the way that the driver discarded the cash into this sort of bin. There was a little bit like tips. So I couldn't quite understand. You see, I mean, I think personally that's talking about that for grace, that say, the free gift of salvation is completely free, but works are expected, of course, that you're going to do things out of the goodness of your new life, that say, that you're going to do things that are what are called the works of being saved, are that you would do good things, because you want to, you want to help out people that need your help, and that's just a product of grace. But what kind of threw me a little bit was this it was almost like a greedy smile. I was kind of like a little bit thrown off by it. I wasn't quite sure whether maybe I was just interpreting this driver's smile incorrectly. I wasn't sure, but these tips were kind of thrown in, and he had a big smile on his face. So I may just interpret this as purely as, he's got a smile on his face because of they are they are works, let's say. So this is something that gives him extra credit, let's say, in heaven, in that he not only has he got grace, but he's also done works. He's done things that will actually get him eternal reward in heaven. Maybe that's what that was meant to represent. A little bit disappointed that I didn't have any money there in my one, but yeah. So I'm not 100% sure, as I said, because I was a little bit confused by the facial expressions, to be honest. But yeah, I put maybe I'll get clearer meaning in my mind in the future. I mean, I don't think I will, to be honest. I just think that's one of those where I think if you get the understanding as to what it means, then maybe the facial expressions were just off. I just wasn't sure whether he was a bit greedy. Again, it was thrown in the bin, makes you think like it's worth nothing, but it was also like a tips thing. So it was like it was worth something at the same time. So it was slightly confusing messaging for me. I'm not quite sure where I sit on that. Yeah, I felt that the crumpled up ticket as well could maybe demonstrate the fact that the grace, let's say, is not invalidated. It's available no matter what your age is, as most people kind of highlighted on the bus that were actually very old. They were all receiving grace late in life, maybe. I didn't really know, why there was so many different older people. Really, they're the main people I saw were older. The smell of urine, could purely be an indication of a lack of self-control or old age, and I've had that kind of lack of self-control indicated before in a dream on a bus. And I remember being on the right-hand side of that bus. Not that I know that makes too much sense, but that one's called "What's That Smell?" Which is pretty much what the driver said, wasn't it? What is that smell? But it was "we" this time. But yeah, that one is a very interesting one. So I would recommend that you watch that. It's going to have a similar message to. I'm going to go through the same scripture actually, but that's an interesting one. So I'm going to quickly read through 2 Timothy. I mean, the specific passage that I want to highlight is actually 2 Timothy 3:3, but I am actually going to read 2 Timothy 3 from 1 to 5, just to give a little bit more information. And this is specifically in the King James Version, because there's a specific word that is written in a certain way. And so I've got out my old Bible, my very first Bible. Look at this. King James Version, all the gold pages. Looks lovely. But all King James, so I mean I read it in all like 1600 language when I first read it. It's interesting how quick your brain adapts to old language like that, and all this thee, thou, and shew me this and shew me that instead of show me this, and all this kind of stuff. Wherefore, all these kind of words. There you go. Whereunto, and all these kind of things. Your brain just adapts very, very quickly. You find, and it's almost like you're just kind of replacing that word with what you know it means. I'm surprised at how quickly that happened. Right, so I'm going to start this, as I said, at 2 Timothy 3, and I'm going to go from 1 to 5. So So this is a second epistle of Paul the apostle. Okay, so this know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, and having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such, from such, turn away. Meaning, those people, don't hang around with them. Yeah. Now, obviously, if you didn't detect it, incontinent. Okay, that in the NIV, I think something like lacks self-control, which again I mentioned, didn't I, when I was very subtly slipping that in there. But it means a lack of self-control. Incontinent. Again, watch that video, and I actually unwrap that quite a bit, the incontinent aspect and how I heard it, how the meaning came to mind, all of that kind of stuff. But incontinent means a lack of self-control, which of course it does. So if if you wet yourself, it's a lack of self-control, isn't it? Your body's not really working in the way that it would normally work. Okay, so that's what I thought it was maybe talking about with the smell aspect, that the people of the last generation really lack self-control. Okay, and that could identify, without being too mean. No, doesn't matter. I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to expand upon that. Right. So I've read that all out. King James Version. Okay. Dream 2 then. So we're going to quickly finish this off, because I didn't quite know when I was reading it how long it would actually take to read this through. I thought it's going to be a bit quicker than that. Dream 2 then. So this is one obviously with the houses, all the houses, yeah? So I think the main takeaway really from the housing dream was would be the homes in heaven, of course, that Jesus is making for us. As mentioned in previous dreams, I'll read a scripture to do with this. And again, this is specifically the King James Version that works best to illustrate this point. Okay, so this is John 14, verses 1 to 3. It's a very, very famous scripture, this one, specifically the King James Version. Okay, so let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you that I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. I recently read this, only like a few videos ago, and I read the NIV version. I read it; it was all over the place reading it, because I'm so used to the King James version. My brain wasn't adapting to the words that were literally in front of me that I was having to read. But it's talking about many mansions. The NIV version says many rooms. Again, I've already mentioned here about this marriage, this wedding video where I mentioned that I was going down a long drive. Well, that one does actually expand and talks about the whole wedding tradition, let's say, and how it all worked in Israel at the time that this was all written. Okay, so if you watch that one, you'll get a lot more information about what this really means. Way more information that maybe you're not aware of. There will certainly be Christians that are aware of this, but there will be some that are not aware of this. Definitely. So definitely go into that one and just get some of the information on that. It's well worth it, honestly. It'll definitely worth it. Definitely worth it. What else we got here? Yeah, so I've decided what I'm going to call this dream is actually called Do It Yourself, because what I felt, well, obviously the mansions thing. Obviously, I was walking around a mansion, wasn't I? And so mansions, and we're talking about mansions in heaven. What's the connection? Well, it's this scripture. So I thought that was a bit self-explanatory, but I do go on to mention that is what I think it's talking about for sure. It doesn't necessarily mean mansions. As I said, it's also listed as rooms. And again, if you watch that video that I mentioned about marriage, then it does talk about the room aspect, it's probably best actually translated as rooms, to be honest, rather than mansions. But again, there's multiple. Again, if you check out the Hebrew and things like that, it gives you explanations as to all the different types of meanings, and then they choose the version that looks like the best fit. Okay, so again, in the King James version, it's mansion. In the NIV and other versions, it's not. It's translated as rooms and stuff like that. So anyway, that mansion aspect obviously clearly took me to that scripture. Next, sorry, the main reason I call this video obviously do it yourself is due to the fact that I think the first bus stream was actually to do with us, to do with using God's grace that's been provided to you in the form of your sin all being debt and all being paid for and available for you to claim at any time, that you cannot do it yourself. You cannot do good things to get yourself into heaven. You cannot purchase your way in. Plus, the second dream, so obviously talking about renovating homes, again had the D.I.Y, do it yourself, because I was renovating a home. So it had like a double meaning across both those dreams that I felt do it yourself was the perfect title. Doing it yourself as in trying to buy your way in, and that you're going to do it rather than relying upon Jesus's, again, giving us grace and the ability to obviously essentially use his victory over sin and claim it as our own. And as I said, this DIY aspect of doing up houses, doing it yourself rather than hiring a tradesman to come in and do it. Yeah, that's what we call it in the UK anyway, do it yourself. I don't know whether that's, again, worldwide or whether it's just a UK thing. But it relates to doing everything related to yourself. Right, that's it. That's the end of the dream. Cool. Ducked to under an hour. I thought it was going to be way quicker, to be honest, but it is what it is. It is what it is. Okay, so I'll cite these scriptures. I don't think there's any scriptures I inferred, I sort of mentioned but didn't go through. So I think it's really just a case of me just listing the one scripture that I covered. Sorry, one scripture? The two scriptures I covered off here with John and Timothy. And obviously listing some of these dreams. So you'll see everything that you need in the description. Always look in the description. You will find lots of extra stuff there that would have been mentioned in the video. That's where you go to get extra information. Also, find a video that says sinner's prayer in inverted commas on it and say that as soon as possible. Go through and say that and invite God into your life so that he can have permission to start working on you and start bringing in taking you through the process of being reborn as a Christian, which is dying to your old self and being a new creation in God. Okay, all right, hopefully you found this helpful and entertaining and draws you to scripture and concepts of the Bible. That is the aim of all of these. Hopefully you found it interesting. See you on the next one.